Okay.
And
And
there we
I
go.
go,
And oh, please silence
okay.
yourself if you're not speaking. And if you have a question, unmute. And you know,
Although, okay, all right. I agree, I greet you all today who are with us, and I greet the people who are understandably choosing to watch the Oscars tonight and will be tuning in
this
to,
meeting is being recorded.
sorry, something. And those of you who will be tuning in the next couple of days to see us on recording. But we have a good turnout. We seem to have close to 20 people. So uh, off we go. Um, I left us last week in the beginning of Act Two, Scene One, which is where Titania and Oberon have had their falling out, and Oberon dispatches Puck to get the little western flower, the one that is magically colored deep purple by Cupid's arrow. And he tells the story of that history. Now, there's some very nice little stagecraft in here. Look how Shakespeare manipulates this. Puck says, I'll make a." Sometimes the words uh, just desert me. That he'll make a circuit round about the earth in 40 minutes. He doesn't need that long, but in the time that he is gone to find this little western flower, Oberon is waiting for his return when into the glade erupt two human mortals, and it's Demetrius and Helena. And as she predicted, she has told Demetrius about Lysander and Hermia's escape, and he has set out in hot pursuit of them, and she has set out in hot pursuit of him, which is very annoying to him because he doesn't love her anymore, and he's after Hermia, and he wants to challenge Lysander, and she's just an inconvenience. So she's chasing him in, sort of clinging on him. Um, he tries to get rid of her. She uses this metaphor: I am your spaniel. And Demetrius, the more you beat me, I will fawn on you. A slightly abject metaphor to use. Um, and often mined in stage productions for a little physical comedy in which she's sort of clinging onto his leg and he's trying to shake her off. And every time he attempts to leave, she trips him up or climbs on top of him and says, "Don't, don't run away from me." But finally, he threatens. He says, "I shall do not doubt, but I shall do thee mischief in the wood." And mischief here, I would say, is pretty ambiguous. Does he mean that he will harm her physically? Does he mean that he will assault her, possibly sexually? In any case, she seems unfazed by that. And night is coming on, as we know, and she's certainly afraid of being left alone. So he leaves and she parts off like a shot after him. Now, Oberon has heard all this. He has informed the audience, I am invisible. So he's standing right there and watching the whole thing. Sometimes, as in when I played Oberon, um, Helena comes so close to him that he can practically inhale her perfume. Um, Whatever it is, by the time she leaves the stage in pursuit of Demetrius, it seems that he's got a certain amount of sympathy for her. Now, this is the first interaction we have between the fairy world and the mortal world. That's why he had to inform us of his invisibility so that we wouldn't be struck by the dissonance between them all being on stage together. And sure enough, right at that moment, Puck returns with the little western flower in his hand, and he's found it and he's brought it home. And Oberon must reason, well, it doesn't take a whole lot of this. Now that I have something, he hadn't specified an amount, and presumably Puck has brought him 3 or 4 blossoms of the flower, and he says, I think I can spare a little extra of this. And he gives a small portion of it to Puck and explains the situation. He says, look you about this wood. An Athenian maiden is in love with a disdainful youth. Anoint his eyes, but do it when the first thing he espies may be the lady. Thou shalt know the man by the Athenian garments he hath on. Because as far as he knows, there are only 2 Athenians in the woods tonight. So Puck sets off. Um, there's a beautiful speech that Oberon has. This is in the latter part, almost near the end of Act 2, Scene 2, which is worth noting because it's another wonderful example of what I've mentioned earlier, is Shakespeare's imagistic painting of the forest, which serves in lieu of scene design in the Elizabethan theater to set up this sense that we are in the enchanted forest. I know a bank where the wild thyme grows, where oxlips and the nodding violet grows, quite over-canopied with luscious woodbine, with sweet musk roses, and with eglantine. There sleeps Titania some time of the night, lulled in these flowers with dances and delight. And there the snake throws his enameled skin weed wide enough to wrap a fairy in. And with the juice of this I'll streak her eyes and make her full of hateful fantasies. So we see what his project is. He's going to enchant Titania himself and contrive it in such a way that she's going to wake up and fall in love with something awful. He doesn't seem to give a whole lot of thought to what it's going to be, but there's plenty of awful things in the forest, so he'll settle. Puck, he delegates to work on the humans. So that's what you do, as there's a certain ranking here, and I only will be the one to enchant Titania, but I'm going to permit you, as my amanuensis, to take care of this problem that this young woman, this lovely young woman, whom I very much appreciated being able to see, um, and rectify the fact that this guy really should be in love with her. But that's not quite how it works out. So first of all, there's Titania. Now we're beginning Act 2, Scene 2. And Titania enters with her fairies, and she asks them to sing her a lullaby while she lies down in her bower and takes a little afternoon nap, sorry, early evening nap. Um, and they sing a lovely lyric. I'm going to be talking before tonight is over about the many, many different verse forms that are present in this play. We last read Richard III. Um, uh, there is very little prose even in Richard III, really only the murderers of Clarence that I recall. Almost the entire play is in iambic pentameter. Not so with this play. The spine of the play is, as always, iambic pentameter, but quite a lot of it rhymes, therefore it's technically called rhyming couplets rather than iambic pentameter or blank verse, which is unrhyming. But there are this proliferation, especially in fairyland, of other verse forms, and it's interesting in that it shows Shakespeare's comfort with working in a variety of forms, but also in the way that it sets the fairyland apart as a different kind of place. Many of these verse forms have shorter lines. And when you are writing rhyming verse in shorter lines than iambics, that means the rhymes come around more often and you're much more aware of them. And as I've said before, I think rhyme is a placeholder for love and for magic and for the magic of love. So, um, as you as you go through fairyland, just take note of the number of different ways in which the language is rhythmed and rhymed and set up, because it points to this sense of enchantment in the forest. So this one is, you spotted snakes with double tongue, thorny hedgehogs, be not seen, mutes and blind worms, do no wrong, come not near our fairy queen. It's basically, let Titania take her nap. There's lots of little creepy crawlies in the forest. Some of them may be animals, some of them may be something else, but they're essentially casting a spell to let her have her sleep in quiet.
Julian, would you please cite the lines that you're quoting?
Well, I'm right at the beginning of that two scene two. Titania has about an 8 line speech, and then we're into the song that I'm speaking of. So at the end of that song, which is about line 14 or so, one of the fairies says, hence away, now all is well, one aloof, stand sentinel, which means basically, just in case, we're setting up a lookout to make sure that no one comes to disturb Titania. Now, what happens to this sentinel is perhaps in Shakespeare's theater, the sentinel was posted just off stage, so we could forget about him, her, or it. Um, although I have seen versions in which Oberon appears and more or less gives the sentinel a Mickey, puts her to sleep through his powers, or, takes her away. And because, of course, he has greater powers than any other forest being, and now he is alone with Titania. And he takes the magic flower, brushes it on her eyes. And here's another verse form, one that we haven't heard. This is basically a trochaic tetrameter for those of you into poetic form. It's a 4-beat line, and it's very much the same rhythm, for instance, that the witches use in Macbeth. Compare to round about the cauldron go, in the poisoned entrails throw, but this is a whiter kind of magic. What thou seest when thou dost wake, do it for thy true love take. Love and languish for his sake, be it ounce or cat or bear, boar, or, pard, or boar with bristled hair, in thine eyes that shall appear, when thou wakest, it is thy dear. And then he half turns away, and as an afterthought, he adds, wake when some vile thing is near. Because he's still bent on getting his way, and it sounds like he's going to take a certain pleasure in the degree to which he can humiliate her. And as we'll see in the coming scene, Puck succeeds in that beyond his wildest dreams, having in the next scene with the mechanicals. Only now does we sort of forget about Titania. She is in a bower. It might be in the inner below, back at the back of the stage. Uh, but she sleeps there for a good, 20 minutes or so, I think, before something happens to wake her up through a couple of scenes. And Famously in the Peter Brook production, she was raised on a trapeze, so she hung above the action, certainly in the audience's eye and consciousness, but essentially invisible to everyone on stage. So who should come running in? Well, walking in, groping their way in now, but Lysander and Hermia. And Lysander is charmingly honest about his limitations. He says, "Love, you faint with wandering in the wood, and to speak truth, I have forgot our way." We're now at about line 40 in the scene. So let's camp out. We're getting tired. It's getting very dark. I can't see my way anymore. Let's just roll up our blanket here on the forest floor in the roots of this here tree, and when it gets light, we'll be able to find our way to my widow aunt's. Um, and there's a glitch, which is there's here she says, "Yeah, I've got one cloak. We can wrap ourselves in it." Hermia is a little leery of lying down next to her lover. Um, Perhaps she feels she has a reputation to keep. She calls herself a maid. I have no reason to believe that she is still a to disbelieve that she is still a virgin. Um, but she puts him off. "Nay, good Lysander, for my sake, my dear, lie further off. Do not lie so near." And he said, "Oh, take the sense, dear, of my innocence. I just want to cuddle. Nothing bad's gonna happen. You can trust me." And they go back and forth a bit. And she tries to be charming. Lysander riddles very prettily, "But I'm not really comfortable with you lying right next to me. So go over there on the other side of the stage, and I'll do fine over here." And finally, he has to give in. And I've seen charming stage business in which he lies down about 10 feet away, and she goes a little further until he's sort of on the edge of the stage, and fine, she says, "That'll do." Uh, at which he remarks, um, "Amen, amen to that fair prayer, say I." He has to put up with it. But of course, this is, as it turns out, a bad mistake on Hermia's part, because Lysander is lying so far from her that when Puck comes in, he sees their separation. He's being a wood spirit, and I think wood spirits probably have a pretty open sexuality. He interprets it as saying it's his fault. He will not lie. Or rather, she says, uh, uh, "She will not lie near this lack love, this kill courtesy. If he really cared about her, he'd snuggle up to her. But since he's over there, obviously he's a cold fish. So that's why he needs this magic." And he drops the love juice in Lysander's eyes, which was intended for Demetrius. And off we go. Now we're into the night of mistakes. Um, Off he goes, and Hermia wakens from, I'm sorry, excuse me. Then enter Helena, who has lost track of Demetrius and stumbles into the same clearing and finds Demetrius there. Hermia is sleeping on through this on the other side of the stage, so it makes a certain amount of sense. And Helena sees Lysander on the ground. She says, What, dead or asleep? Lysander, if you please, good sir, awake. And she shakes him awake. He opens his eyes, he sees her, and he's gone. And run through fire I will for thy sweet sake. Uh, and taking her much aback, she doesn't understand what is going on. I won't go into the details, except finally, uh, she runs off into the forest. I don't know what you're doing, Lysander, but this is not what I want. You should be looking after Hermia. Lysander realizes that she has not seen Hermia, doesn't know she's there. But he looks back at Hermia, and suddenly all that love that he had for Hermia is gone. As we discussed last week, uh, there seems to be only room for one love object in the world when you're a lover. And whoever is not that lover is a source of indifference or possibly even loathing to you. So he says he realizes that Helena has not seen Hermia, and he says, Hermia, lie thou there, and never mayst thou come Lysander near. As far as he's concerned, that whole relationship is dead, and he'll honor Helen and to be her knight, and he sets off in pursuit of her. At that moment, Hermia awakes. She's having a nightmare about a snake which is wriggling up her body and and eating at her heart. And in the dream, Lysander is standing there, sort of nodding and saying, "That's nice," which is, in a way, a kind of transmuted version of the truth. And she realizes she is alone in the forest. Night has completely fallen now. She has no idea where she is. And she rushes off into the dark, determined to find Lysander. She doesn't know yet that Helena has come through or that Lysander's affections for her have been alienated. So that leaves the stage empty, except for the sleeping Titania, who, as I say, may be invisible to us. And now we move on to the second scene with the mechanicals. And this is a charming scene, I think, for a number of reasons. They've all gone off to the forest because, as Peter Quince says, if we rehearse in the city, we'll be observed and all our devices known. And then they're keeping a big secret about their attempt to put a play together to please the Duke on his wedding night. So, as I say, perhaps a little pushing credulity a little bit, they've decided to meet in the forest to rehearse in secret. So they all arrive, and immediately they run into some problems. And they've now all had chance to read the script, and Bottom in particular, because he's the leading man, because he really wants all this to be his stage debut and something very special. He says, well, there's a problem here, Peter Quince. It says here in the script that Pyramus must draw a sword and kill himself, which the ladies, they know there are going to be ladies present, the ladies cannot abide. What say you to it? And they go back and forth for a while, and finally, one of them comes up with a solution. Well, we'll put in a prologue. And in the prologue, we'll tell everybody, don't worry, this is not the real thing you're seeing. This is only a play. And when you see a man draw a sword and apparently kill himself, which you're very likely to believe otherwise is real life, you must know that I'm not Pyramus, I'm Bottom the Weaver, I'm just playing a part. And then that leads to Another compunction about the lion. Will not the ladies be afeard of the lion? That's a good. Let's think that one over. And Bottom, always helpful, says, "Oh, to bring in a lion among ladies is a most fearful thing." So someone speaks up and says, "All right, another prologue, a prologue to the prologue, perhaps, must say that he is not a lion." And Bottom is all for that. Now, Quince probably isn't, because he's already been writing like mad, and now he has to write two more prologues, and there's the task is mounting up. Um, so they say, all right, another prologue. And then Bottom says, no, we can do even better than that. Make the costume so that his face shows through. Now, the mane's up here, and maybe you can give him claws and all of that. But they have to be able to see his face to say, it's not, I'm not a real lion. And then he can make a little speech and say, you must understand that I am not a lion. I'm just Snug the Joiner, and I'm not going to hurt anybody. And this festive occasion, which we're supposed to contribute to, will not be ruined by women shrieking and running away because they see horrible things happening before them. And they finally sort it all out. And then, wait a minute. What about the moon? Does the moon shine on the night that we play this play? And they look in the almanac and they say, yes, the moon does shine that night. Shakespeare may have shortcutted himself a little here. I had the same problem in that in a never mind. There's a screenplay in which it's the full moon, and then suddenly there's an eclipse the next night. Um, um, they say, well, you can leave a, a, a window in the great chamber open, and the moon can shine through, and then we'll have our moonlight. Having forgotten, apparently, that they're being married at the new moon. Nevertheless, someone says, well, maybe the moon's shining in the wrong direction or something. Why don't we have another person play the moon? So these minor characters who have been told they're playing fathers and mothers of the lovers are now reassigned to play lion, moonshine, wall. Uh, and uh, You must know that the Elizabethans saw a man in the moon the way we did, the way we do, but that their man in the moon was not a face. Their man in the moon, which they saw, and I've been looking for it half my life, and I've never been able to see it, was a man and a dog standing by a thorn bush. That's the Elizabethan reading of the man in the moon. So he said, well, we'll have a man, give him a lantern, and give him a thorn bush and a dog, and everything will be fine. So finally, they work out all their problems. They are determined not to offend in any way the sensibilities of those that act. Uh, I find this scene very charming, not only because of the comedy in it, but for the touching faith that these amateur performances have in the power of theater. On some level, they really believe that it is very important that everything in their play must be harmonious and unthreatening. And they really believe not only that they'd be thrown out of the palace, for inappropriate entertainment, but that people's sensibilities will be disturbed by things that we could have avoided. And that's why they're at such pains to make sure that the lion and the death scenes, which are to be performed, are understood to be only a play, everyone. Don't worry. Um, Professional actors, I think, kind of miss this when they do it because they find it sort of absurd on the face of it. But if you're an amateur, if you're somebody who really wants to believe that theater has power to move and transform people, it would make a certain amount of sense that you would say, well, we have to think all these things through. So all of this finally gets sorted out, and Bottom, who is to play Pyramus, steps off stage, which is to say into the hawthorn brake that they've seen at one side, and they say, this could be our tiring house, which is basically the Elizabethan backstage. And he's awaiting his entrance. Um, Thisbe stands forth, that's flute, trying on his little voice to be a beautiful young lady. And he has to be prompted and corrected. Everybody tends to think that Ninus's tomb should be pronounced Ninny's tomb. Uh, that's a running joke which is introduced here. Um, and finally, she gives her cue line. As true as truest horse that yet would never tire, I'll meet thee, Pyramus, at Ninny's tomb. And what they don't know is that while Bottom is off in the hawthorn brake, preparing for his entrance, Puck has worked his mischievous magic and he's turned Bottom's head into an ass's head. And he comes out in some form. I've already talked about the various forms the ass head can take with between a full head mask or something partial, partly transparent, or simply an addition of a pair of donkey's ears and maybe a pair of buck teeth, uh, and announces himself, if I were fair, Thisbe, I were only thine, and they all see what they perceive to be a monster or a transformation of their friend Bottom, which is inexplicable. And they panic. Now, this transformation is kind of an interesting transformation because, in their terms, Bottom has been turned from a man into a monster. Except, as we find out in this scene, and even more in the next scene after he and Titania have had their private session together, turning into an ass is not really a transformation for Bottom, or not a complete transformation. In a sense, it simply brings out who he really is, if we take ass metaphorically. And in fact, as we hear him speak, we realize more and more that it has not transformed his character at all. In fact, it seems that he's completely unaware uh, of what has happened to him. And that was one of the big mistakes, I thought, that was made in the old Max Reinhardt one in 1935 with Jimmy Cagney playing Bottom, was that he sort of began to realize something was wrong. He looked in a stream, he saw his reflection and was deeply disturbed by what he saw. I don't think it's meant that way. I believe Bottom experiences the world as he has always experienced it. There's some differences in his behavior. He seems to be less interested in, eating bread and cheese and more interested in hay. And he has itches in funny places that he asks the fairies to scratch. But in a very real sense, the ass head transformation just makes Bottom more what he already is. And therefore, when everybody freaks out and runs away from him, he doesn't understand why they're doing it. He's saying this is to make an ass of me, he says, meaning it metaphorically, but it actually has a more literal meaning than that. And he says, I'll walk up and down and sing, and eventually they'll come back. So he sings a song about the woozle cock, so black of hue, and the sound of the singing awakes Titania. There's built-in opportunities for the comedian, by the way, because the lyrics of the song are the plain song cuckoo's gray, whose note full many a man doth mark, and dares not answer nay. Uh, so he's in this liminal space right now between human and donkey. And it's at that moment that Titania awakes and immediately falls in love with him with no sense of irony whatsoever. And everything about him, his fair, large ears, his furry neck, his deep eyes, everything is beautiful to her. He's a little nonplussed by this, but once again, he rides it so beautifully. And he says, "Well, I've always thought I was a fine figure of a man. So if this strange foreign lady wants to make love to me, I got no problem with that." And she brings in her attendant fairies. Now, these are fairies played by either adults or no less than teenagers. But of course, they're all given names: Peas Blossom, Cobweb, Moth, Mustard Seed, denoting tininess. And there is there's a sort of double vision here in which they are clearly adult people who can scratch his head and bring him things, but at the same time, he speaks to them as though they are microscopic, really small. Um, and we'll see that developed more. Basically, Titania calls them to her, says, "Wait upon him, bring him to my bower," which is presumably the private place where she will have her fill of him, and they lead him off in a sense of anticipation, perhaps. Very evident arousal in the Peter Brook version. I remember there's a certain phallic imagery implied, um, and off they go, and we come to Act Three. And that begins, excuse me, that was Act Three, Scene One. Um, and Act Three, Scene Two, this is often where the intermission is taken. Act Three, Scene Two begins with Oberon alone. I wonder if Titania be awaked, and what it was that first came in her eyes, that when she waked. And in comes Puck to make his report. And in a rather long speech, Puck says, "Oh, are you lucky? My mistress with a monster is in love." Tell me more, says Oberon. "Well, I found this crew of patches, rude mechanicals." That's where the phrase comes from that we generally designate them by now. Were met together to rehearse a play, and the shallowest thick skin of that common sort, which Pyramus presented in their sport, bottom, forsook his scene and entered in a break, and I an ass's knoll I fitted on his head. He finds this hilarious, so soon does Oberon. Um, So he recounts how he came out to make his entrance, how it freaked out his fellow actors, how they scattered in every direction, leaving him there alone. And in that moment, so it came to pass, Titania waked and straightway loved an ass. And Oberon loves it. He could not have thought of a more humiliating outcome for Titania, and he feels sure that this gives him the upper hand in his competition with her for the changeling boy. So he basically pats Puck on the head. He says, "Good job, my man. You have done exactly as I asked you to do." And at that point, enter Demetrius and Hermia. Now, Demetrius, as we know, had fled Helena and went off by himself, and Hermia, not finding Lysander, has gone off by herself, and now they have encountered each other in the woods. And Hermia is hopping mad. She said, "First of all, my Lysander, whom I love, has deserted me or has disappeared. I have no idea what has come to him." And Demetrius, who is unrepentant, says, "If I could find him, I'd give his carcass to my hounds." In other words, rhetorically, he's saying, "I'd like to kill the guy." And Hermia tumbles to the conclusion, "My God, you've murdered him." Uh, and now we're getting deep into the weeds here. Um, and excuse me. Finally, she slaps him around a little. She plunges off into the forest by herself, saying, "If I'll find him if he's still alive." And Demetrius has been exhausted by having Helena running after him, and now he decides to lie down and take a nap. Um, and uh, we've gotten a clue at the top of the scene when Puck and Oberon have watched them come in, and Oberon says, "This is that same Athenian," and Puck says, "This is the woman, but not this the man," at which Oberon looks at him and says, "What?" in essence. And now that Hermia is gone and Demetrius lies down to have a nap, he turns on him. "What hast thou done? Thou hast mistaken quite, and laid the love juice on some true love's sight." And Puck is more or less unrepentant. He says, "Well, yeah, I guess I messed up, but sure is fun to watch." And Oberon dispatches him to get Hermia, get Helena, bring her back here, and we're going to sort this out. Now I'm going to, um, uh, excuse me. Now I'm going to make things right again, which is that I have another herb which I can use to heal this illusion that they're in love. In other words, once I get Lysander, I can get him to sleep. I can restore him to his proper sanity. Um, and in the meantime, I will treat Demetrius and get him to fall in love with Helena, which is what we want to happen. So let me locate for you where we are. We're at Act 3, Scene 2, line 100, basically. Puck says, I go, swifter than an arrow from the Tartar's bow." And Oberon uses the flower on Demetrius. "Flower of this purple dye, hit with Cupid's archer eye, sink in apple of his eye. When his love he doth espy, let her shine as glorious lie as the Venus of the sky. When thou wakest, if she be by, beg of her for remedy." All of those were at least closer rhymes in Shakespeare's English than they are in ours. And In comes Demetrius, sorry, in comes Helena, um, and pursued closely by Lysander, who is now gaga over her. And as she begins to think that something very weird is happening here, their argument boils over into um, into her saying Demetrius loves her and he loves not you. Sorry, Lysander. Even I get confused after all these years. Um, it ends with Demetrius awaking and seeing Helena, and this is now the intended result for Oberon is now Demetrius is in love with Helena as he was meant to be. The problem is, so is Lysander, and now the two men are in conflict with each other, and they start pushing each other around and making threats. And at that point, enter Hermia, and now we have the sort of great set piece of the lovers in the forest, in which all four of them are on stage with Hermia now being the one that Helena was before. Nobody loves me. Helena is the one that Hermia was before. Two men love me. And consonant with this convention that you can't stand who you no longer love, both Lysander and Demetrius are scorning Hermia. Uh, it eventually, I'm not going to go into this scene in great detail. It's rather lovely. Um, but the key moment is the moment when Hermia says, "Oh, lo, she is one of this confederacy," pointing at Helena. She's behind all of this. And now they're all decided to make fun of me because I was just a simple girl in love. And now they've all turned on me. And this is all to make you sport. So she accuses Helena of having stolen Lysander's heart from her. Helena says, I don't know what you're talking about, and it's you guys that are clearly ganging up on me to make fun of me. Have you not set Lysander as in scorn to follow me and praise my eyes and face, and made your other love, Demetrius, who even before did scorn me with his foot to call me rare, exceptional, etc.? And everyone is very unhappy at this point. Both women are miserable for different reasons. Hermia because she's been deserted. Helena because she thinks this is all some elaborate plot to humiliate her. And the boys, both of whom are mad to possess Helena, now are threatening to fight each other. And it eventually brings us to the point at which Oberon has to step in. The boys go off to fight each other. Uh, Helena has her claws out and is going for Hermia, who is running away from her. So they're all out in the forest in the middle of the night, all unhappy, all frustrated, all scared. And Oberon rounds on Puck and says, "Look what you've done." And it's at this point that Puck says, "Well, what fools these mortals be." He disclaims responsibility for it. He says, "This their jarring I esteem a sport." I'm sure they're in pain and so forth, but I love watching this kind of thing happen. So Oberon, it seems, has a certain amount of sympathy for the emotional turmoil of mortals, but Puck, being essentially the emotional equivalent of a 12-year-old boy, I think, can only see the funny side of it. So Oberon says, okay, I'm going to try to sort all of this out. I'll send fog out through the forest. That way they won't be able to even see each other. You use your magical powers to imitate the voices of Lysander and Demetrius and gradually lead them through the forest until they're exhausted and bring them back here and put them to sleep, and I'll fix things. Same with the women. Round them up, get them heading in this direction. But because of the fog, none of them actually sees each other. And there's this scene in which Demetrius and Lysander are pursuing each other through the forest, unable to see where each other are, but hear what they think is the other's voice. And Puck gradually manipulates them all back into the same place. One by one, they drop from exhaustion and fall asleep. And Oberon is finally able to start putting things to rights. So he takes the white flower, what is essentially the antidote flower, and he drops that on Lysander's eyes so that when he wakes up, make sure that he's lying next to Hermia. So when he sees Hermia, everything will be okay with them. And we'll leave Demetrius as he is in love with Hermia, and now he doesn't have a rival for her. They can have a certain amount of peace. So they are all brought together, and it's now their turn to sleep on stage while other things go on that do not wake them. I remember we did this play the year that we opened the Bruns Amphitheater in Orinda. And we discovered several things about the Orinda stage that summer. One was that the wind howled through it like a son of a bitch. And people had to wrap up really, really warmly on breezy nights. And the other was that in the matinees, on the other hand, the sun beat down on this surface blindingly. I remember standing on stage as Theseus and literally being unable to open my eyes. I would deliver speeches like this because the glare that was coming up from the sun made it physically impossible to open your eyes. Um, and at the same time, the poor lovers who had to now sleep for 20 or 25 minutes would freeze on evening performances and fry on matinees. So various dispositions of cloaks and bits of scenery were made to sort of attempt to shade them or to at least keep the stage under their bodies from heating up over, say, 120 degrees. Um, but that's just anecdotal. Um, in any case, now re-enter Titania and Bottom and the fairies, and in what very much seems like a sort of state of post-coital bliss. Titania is having him rest his donkey head in her lap and stroking his ears and telling him how beautiful he is and sending the fairies away to bring him whatever sweetmeats he wants. Well, it turns out mostly what he wants is hay. And uh, Scratch My Head, Peas Blossom, and he deputes, I think, mustard seed probably to go and shoot a red-hipped humblebee on the top of a thistle and bring me the honey bag. He's basically like an Eastern pasha now, being waited on hand and foot by servants with the capability to fly anywhere in the world and get him anything he wants. And again, it's very characteristic of Bottom that he takes it all in stride. There's nothing in him that stops and says, why are these people always being so nice to me now, all of a sudden? Uh, what is so special about me? It's just all right. He's very much at peace, comfortable with himself, and that character trait in him carries over from his human life straight into his asshead life. It's all of a piece. So he's mildly surprised, perhaps, that this beautiful foreign lady seems to want to take him to bed, and she's probably really hot. And we have every reason to believe that their couple of hours together have been very satisfactory for both of them. But she, because she's under an enchantment, and he, because he's what he is, they they don't find it particularly strange. They take it in stride. Finally, she falls asleep with his head in her lap, and Oberon and Puck reappear. And he looks down at what he's created here. And the first line is, welcome, good Robin, seest thou this sweet sight? But there's a feeling now that his emotional temperature has changed. I'm going to start reading again at Act 3, Scene 2. I'm actually I want to back up a little earlier in the scene. So if you are following along, um, this is at the point when he tells Robin to overcast the night and create the fog that will let him sort this out, because an important thing has happened here. Puck realizes that dawn is not far away. This is line 178 of Act 3, Scene 2. My fairy lord, this must be done with haste. For night's swift dragons cut the clouds full fast, and yonder shines Aurora's harbinger, the morning star, at whose approach ghosts, wandering here and there, troop home to churchyards, damned spirits all, that in crossways and floods are buried, have burial, already to their wormy beds are gone, for fear lest day should look their shames upon. They wilfully themselves exile from night, and must for aye consort with black-browed night. Sounds very much here as though Puck, even though he's a fairy himself, is freaked out by some aspects of the fairy kingdom, or something that's certainly adjacent to the fairy kingdom. Like us, there are spirits out there who are invisible, perhaps to mortal eyes, but not to us, who are damned, or they're in some space beyond human life in any case, and they've been buried in crossroads, which was what you did with vampires, and serial killers. So it's an important hinge in the play, because Oberon answers this by saying, but we are spirits of another sort. I with the morning's love have oft made sport, And like a forester, the groves may tread, even till the eastern gate, all fiery red, opening on Neptune with fair blessed beams, turns into yellow gold his salt green streams. No, Puck, we are not vampires. We are not that kind of spirit. We are not that kind of malevolence. Yes, you play tricks on old ladies and make them fall on their bums, and you sometimes make the milk go bad in the churn, but we can live with that. We are not evil spirits. We are on the sunny side. And he says specifically, I stay up till dawn and I see the sun come up and I don't burn up like Count Dracula. We are spirits of another sort. And that's important because we have capitalized to some degree earlier in the play on the sense that these are spirits of whose motivations and whose actions we cannot fully understand. And it, Oberon feels it's incumbent on him to draw a sharp line between mischief on the one hand and actual malevolence on the other. He says, no, we don't have any truck with the dead or the walking dead or the undead or damned spirits. We belong to nature. We belong to what renews and refreshes. And it's a little, what's the phrase? A learning opportunity for Puck to be sort of educated in what we are is not
Teaching moment.
teaching moment. Thank you. Uh, what we are is not that darker side of folklore. We don't have malevolence for human beings. We're amused by them sometimes. We can laugh at them. We can tease them. But ultimately, they are God's creatures as we are, and we are in sympathy with them. That happens just before the putting to sleep of the mortals. So now I move back ahead. Um, and Puck is deputed to Puck is deputed to heal, give the healing white flower now to Lysander, who will revert to what he should be, which is in love with Hermia, who is lying by his side. So when he wakes, if all goes well, everything will sort out. So Oberon then takes his white flower and he heals Titania's eyes. Be as thou wast wont to be, see as thou wast wont to see. Dian's bud or Cupid's flower hath such force and blessed power. Now, my Titania, wake you, my sweet queen. And just before this, by the way, he said, while you're doing this, I'll to my queen and beg her Indian boy. It's just a passing moment, but it points to something. Earlier, he said, of course, he was demanding the changeling boy. And later on, he said, I'll make her render up her boy to me. There's a change of tone here. I'll to my queen and beg her Indian boy. And then he relates that he has found her hanging garlands around the neck of her new lover, the asshead man, and chided her, all in a sense, a state of hypnosis, as it would seem from her point of view. And she has granted him the Indian boy, and he has sent him to my bower in fairyland. So that part of the quarrel has been resolved. And some may find it adequate in terms of how apologetic he is to her, or how much power perhaps he still is exerting over her. But that word beg has implied that he goes back to her with a certain humility and a certain willingness to make a truce. So, at this point, enter. Now we're at Act 3, Scene, no, Act 4, Scene 1 now. Um, Let me find you a line number. I think it's Act 4, Scene 1 at about line 102, with the entrance of Theseus, Hippolyta, and Aegeon, and huntsmen, usually long before Mendelssohn, but also in Mendelssohn, announced by French horns, hunting horns. And it appears that Theseus and Hippolyta have also made their way to the woods, now at the break of dawn, because hunters get up early, and they are on their way to hunt the deer. And an interesting exchange happens between them that I think is worth looking at closely. So Theseus says, "Find out the forester, we will unto the mountain's top. My love shall hear the music of my hounds." Okay. And he says to Hippolyta, this is I think, the morning before their wedding, says to her at line 108, "We will, fair queen, up to the mountain's top, and mark the musical confusion of hounds and echo in conjunction." And she answers, "I was with Hercules and Cadmus once, when in a wood of Crete they bayed the bear with hounds of Sparta. Never did I hear such gallant chiding. For besides the groves, the skies, the fountains, every region near seemed all one mutual cry. I never heard so musical a discord, such sweet thunder." This is hunter's language. I'm not a dog person myself, but uh, one of the great pleasures, I think, of hunting to hounds, as the English did for many generations. The nasty side of it, of course, is watching the pack tear the fox into little bits, and or the deer, and then cutting out the deer's vital organs and feeding them to the hounds. That's the nasty side of it. But Theseus, who's a pretty materialistic guy, and both in the first scene and in the coming scene, is seen to be sort of a realist, or a rationalist, perhaps is a better word. He seems to value law and reason very highly. He has an aesthetic, and this aesthetic is reflected in the sound of a pack of hounds as musical, as a sense of harmony. Um, and it seems to me at this point that some kind of connection is made between Hippolyta and Theseus. Hippolyta is to some degree identified with Diana. Diana is the goddess of the moon, but she's also the goddess of the hunt, one of the better known Greek myths, which Shakespeare got handed down through Ovid and the Metamorphoses, was the story of Actaeon, who had glimpsed Diana bathing, and she set her hounds upon him, turned him into a stag, and had them tear him to pieces. So there's this hunting super text attached to the goddess Diana. And perhaps Hippolyta and Theseus don't get the same thing out of a hunt, but it's somewhere where they can connect. It's somewhere where they have a consonance of tastes and of something that they love. And I think that's more what Shakespeare intended. I've said before that I was disturbed by the interpretations of Hippolyta that make her some sort of enslaved warrior queen who's bound up in chains and leather and never allowed to forget that she was defeated in battle. And I think for there to be some sort of satisfaction and sense of completion in the play requires that there be a sense between Theseus and Hippolyta that their marriage is going to mean something, that they have enough common ground to make a meaningful relationship. So that's me. That's where I feel. There are other points of view. So as they're in the middle of this dialogue about hunting, they notice, my goodness, there are people here. They're lying asleep on the grass. I sort of think of this as being the edge of the forest, maybe, and then the early morning sun is starting to come in and light up the trees. And Aegeus, rather puzzled, my lord, this is my daughter here asleep, and here Demetrius, this Lysander is. I wonder of them being here together. And Theseus, I think tongue in cheek, his response is, no doubt they rose up early to observe the night of May, the rite of May, and hearing our intent came here in grace of our solemnity. I just read a critic who takes that literally. I don't think Theseus thinks that for a moment. I think he looks at young people and knows what happens at the rite of May, by the way. It's May, the lusty month of May, and everybody goes blissfully astray. Um, and begins to see a little bit of the humor of the situation. Aegeus does not, of course. Um, Theseus says, go bid the huntsmen wake them with their horns. I just have a good anecdote here from the Ashland production that I was in 1971, in which I was playing Aegeus. And that show ran in the Bomer Theater. It was only the second year of the indoor theater. And four of my good friends were playing the lovers. And it ran for over 100 performances. And by the end of the run, everybody was getting a little tired. And the actors, I began to notice, had simply let themselves drift off to sleep um, while other things were happening around them on stage. But they had learned that the horn cue was their insurance policy because it was always loud enough to wake them up if they had in fact nodded off. Well, one matinee performance, I think it was. Matinees are always a sleepier time. Um, The sound technician hit the wrong button, and the cue of the hunting horns came over the wrong speakers. The speakers way at the back of the house, and therefore only at about a third of the volume they normally do. Well, three of the lovers were able to hear it and um, groggily got to their feet. But the fourth just slept right on, and I knew he had lines coming up pretty soon. So I went over to him, started kicking him with no, I think I prodded him with my sword, which is probably the rudest awakening he ever had on stage. Anyway, they all struggle to their feet, and try to explain themselves, and of course they can't. Demetrius, I think. It's Lysander, first at line 145, who says, "My lord, I shall reply amazedly, half sleep, half waking, but as yet I swear I cannot truly say how I came hither. But as I think, etc., we came with Hermia hither, we were trying to avoid the law. That sends Aegeus over the top. I crave the law upon his head," which of course is the magic word with Theseus, being a legally endowed ruler. They thought to have defeated you and me. And Demetrius, of all things, speaks up and says, "My lord, fair Helen told me of their stealth, of this their purpose hither to this wood, and I in fury hither followed them. Fair Helena in fancy following me, but my good lord, I wot not by what power, but by some power it is, my love to Hermia, melted as the snow, seems to me now as the remembrance of an idol god, which in my childhood I did dote upon. And all the faith, the virtue of my heart, the object and the pleasure of mine eye, is only Helena. To her, my lord, was I betrothed ere I saw Hermia. But like a sickness did I loathe this food, but as in health come to my natural taste. Now I do wish it, love it, long for it, and will forevermore be true to it. And finally, the fairy's intervention has worked out as it was supposed to, that Demetrius, who now seems in his love for Hermia to have been suffering from some kind of delusion, can see clearly again, and all is as it should be. As Puck said when he was anointing Lysander's eyes earlier in the scene, "Jack shall have Jill, naught shall go ill. The man shall have his mare again, and all shall be well." And now we're on our way to a comic resolution. And I mean comic in the very classical sense of comedy. Comedy is supposed to make you laugh, sure, but that's not the essential purpose of comedy. The essential purpose of comedy is to serve as a counterpart to tragedy. What tragedy reminds us is death is there and it awaits every one of us. And ultimately, in the contest between us and death, death will always win. What comedy is doing is saying, yes, that is true. As individuals, we die. But we have children, and those children carry on a little bit of us, and the species survives. And that there will always be renewal. And it's that sense of things coming together and creating new life that is essential to comedy. And that now is going to essentially rule the rest of the play through its Act 5 to its conclusion. But not before. Um, the four lovers are left alone for a moment. Said, "We'll see you all back in Athens. Once you put your clothes on." Uh, in the RSC production, they had all been in and out of so many thickets and ditches that they were covered with mud and leaves and generally filthy. And in one of the versions I've seen, I think it's the one with Kevin Kline, they actually all end up naked uh, and have to quickly cover themselves with whatever blanket or piece of cloth they can find in order to greet the Duke and Duchess. Um, so they're all under orders to return to the court and be married in the same ceremony tonight or tomorrow night that will bind Theseus and Hippolyta. Um, and this wonderful exchange, starting with Demetrius at line 185 of Act 4, Scene 1. These things seem small and undistinguishable, like far-off mountains turn it into clouds. We've all been in a vista that we can see something in the distance and we're not sure if it's a mountain or a cloud, and then maybe a sunbeam comes out or a wind comes up and we say, oh, it was only a cloud. Methinks I see these things with parted eye, says Hermia, when everything seems double. So methinks, says Helena, and I have found Demetrius like a jewel, mine own and not mine own. Are you sure that we are still awake? Says Demetrius. It seems to me that yet we sleep, we dream. Do not you think the Duke was here and bade us follow him? And yes, they all say, okay, then we are awake. Let's follow him. And by the way, let us recount our dreams. So they all head back to the palace, leaving the stage empty. Not quite, because Bottom is still there. And Bottom has had, at Oberon's order, has had Puck take the ass head from off him, and he's back to what he was. And he has this tremendous prose speech. When my cue comes, call me, and I will answer. My next is most fair Pyramus. Peter Quince. Flute the bellows member. Snout the tinker. Starveling. My her life, stolen hence and left me asleep. And he tries to put together, like a man waking from a dream, what has happened. I have had a most rare vision. I have had a dream past the wit of man to tell what dream it was. Man is but an ass if he go about to expound this dream. Methought I was, there's no man can say what. Methought I was, and methought I had, and sometimes he goes up and feels, are they still there? And sometimes his hands go down below his waist. He says, is it still there? But there's no man is but a patched fool if he go about to say, what methought I had? And finally he says, I will get Peter Quince to write a ballad of this dream. It shall be called Bottom's Dream, because it hath no bottom. Bottom in this case meaning there's no point to it. And I shall sing it at the latter end of our play before the Duke. Perchance to make it the more gracious, I shall sing it at her death. And we see that Bottom has gone straight through, untroubled by all that has happened to him. Except he has a strange memory of something that was probably a dream in which there was a very beautiful woman and a whole lot of strange stuff happened. But whatever it is, it doesn't change him. We then have a brief scene with the mechanicals in which, have you sent to Bottom's house yet? No, it cannot be heard of. They've lost him. The last thing they knew, he had stepped into a thicket and then something came out that was so horrible they can hardly think of it. And now that no one has seen him, so they say, well, if he doesn't come, the play goes not forward, does it? And oh, who is it? Uh, it is Flute who says, "Oh, sweet bully Bottom, hath he lost sixpence a day during his life?" Say he's absolutely sure that he would have been such a star that the Duke would have given him a pension for life, and now none of us can ever hope for that again, for that big break in the theater that we were going to have. And sure enough, Bottom turns up. He's completely unchanged. He's ready to go. And he says, get new ribbons for your pumps and new spirit gum for your beards, and we'll all meet me because our play is preferred, which means to say it's made the short list. As we eventually learn, the short list is 4 things. And so we're in the final elimination process. So we have to show up at the palace and be ready to go when the ball drops because we have a chance. And they all bustle off. So we're finally to Act 5 now, and I think, about 10 more minutes to wrap up Act 5, which is sort of too bad because a lot happens. But I'm I'm going to let Pyramus and Thisbe kind of speak for itself. I can't do it justice uh, reading any part of it or talking about the many, many funny things that actors have done with it. But I do want to talk about the scene that precedes the presentation of Pyramus and Thisbe, which is Theseus again, still the rationalist, still the man who thinks he has it all figured out. Because Hippolyta is saying, "'Tis strange, my Theseus, that these lovers speak of. Everyone has thought, this is the most unusual thing that has just happened. We can't really explain it." "More strange than true," says Theseus. "I never can believe these antique fables, nor these fairy toys. Lovers and madmen have such seething brains, such shaping fantasies, that apprehend more than cool reason ever comprehends. The lunatic, the lover, and the poet are of imagination all compact. They're all the same. One sees more devils than vast hell can hold. That is the madman. The lover, all as frantic, sees Helen's beauty in a brow of Egypt. Brow of Egypt is the dark complexion of a gypsy, which is not the Elizabethan ideal of beauty. So they're both slaves to illusion. The madman hallucinates, and the lover, in his own sense, hallucinates too. He imposes beauty on the thing he sees, even though it's not a beautiful thing. The poet's eye, in a fine frenzy rolling, doth glance from heaven to earth, from earth to heaven, and as imagination bodies forth the forms of things unknown, the poet's pen turns them to shapes and gives to airy nothing a local habitation and a name. I'm reading it rather lyrically now, but it probably should be played with a little bit of cynicism underneath. Such tricks hath strong imagination that if it would but apprehend some joy, it comprehends some bringer of that joy, or in the night imagining some fear, how easy is a bush supposed a bear? So this is a difficult speech to interpret, but I take it to mean, you know, poets and artists are all very well, but they don't see the real world for what it is. They substitute imagination for the real. And you can't run a kingdom that way. Um, you have to be ruled by, he's sort of an enlightenment figure, you have to be ruled by the rational. But Hippolyta has a counter to it. But all the story of the night told over, and all their minds transfigured so together, more witnesseth than fancies images, and grows to something of great constancy, but howsoever strange and admirable. I can't make sense of what they're all saying, of their various hallucinations, but they all seem to have hallucinated the same thing. And something has happened here that we don't really understand, but it has to do with imagination and it has to do with art. And in a sense, it's kind of meta that way. Um, there's a play within a play coming, Pyramus and Thisbe, in the literal sense, in that there's people sitting on stage who are audience and other people standing on stage who are performers. But what's hinted at here, is something that stands between the world of dreams and the world of art. And we can't really put our finger on it, but it grows to something of great constancy. It has, I'd say constancy is close to consistency. It has a substance in it that can't be reasoned away or dismissed. Something has happened here that we don't understand, and let's give them the space for that. So up comes uh, up comes the master of the revels. Here I am again, Philostrate, and he says, well, these are the possibilities we have for the evening's entertainment. And he names a battle with the centaurs and a bitter satire on something and an allegory. And finally, he says, a tedious brief scene of Pyramus and his love, Thisbe, very tragical mirth, which of course is full of contradictions. And something in Theseus perks up. He's not really interested in, being lectured at or sitting in at a poetry reading. But a tedious brief scene, tragical mirth, that sounds kind of interesting. Let's see what this is up to. So the mechanicals have their chance and they trot out their weird little uh, accumulation of costumes and props and a wall, and they put on their show. Um, there's a speech here I'm going to talk about of Quince's because it's difficult to put across to a modern audience, but um, it's the apology speech. There's two prologues, just as we said. The first one starts at line 108, if we offend, written as prologue. And I'm going to read it the way that Quince wrote it, intending it to go. If we offend, it is with our good will that you should think we come not to offend, but with good will, to show our simple skill. That is the true beginning of our end. Consider then, we come, but in despite we do not come, as minding to content ye our true intent is. All for your delight. Sorry, our true intent is all for your delight. We are not here that you should here repent you. The actors are at hand, etc. In other words, it makes perfect sense if it's punctuated the way that he meant it to be punctuated. But his nerves are so bad that he has trouble remembering his lines and that he sees the Duke there and Hippolyta there and the whole court. He's afflicted with stage fright. So he keeps stopping it at the wrong moments, and that turns it into verbal hash. In other words, if we offend, it is with our goodwill, and so forth. He says the speech ends up saying the opposite of what he intended it to say, which was very diplomatic and very conciliatory. And then he has the longer speech in which he delivers what they call the argument of the play, the second prologue, in which he's incorporated all this beast, which Lion hight by name, is actually Snug the Joiner, he lays them all out and then has delegated for each actor to explain himself. Um, so the play begins, and out comes Wall, first of all, who explains, I am an actor representing the wall, and I have a chink. And through this chink, Pyramus and Thisbe are going to have a conversation. And then out comes Pyramus, and he makes a speech which is sort of pure Christopher Marlowe, just great old Admiral's men rant. Oh, grim-looked night! Oh, night with you so black! Oh, night, whichever art when day is not! Oh, night, alack, 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 and so forth. It has all the sort of rhetorical tricks that Shakespeare's audience would have associated with the rhetoric of about 15 years ago, uh, which Shakespeare has now considerably transcended. This is shortly after the death of Marlowe, I think, and Marlowe was his friend, so it's probably not a malicious satire, but it is a satire, I think, on Marlowe, Nash, Kidd, whoever you like, the generation of playwrights that ruled the stage when Shakespeare arrived in London. And then you have this charming moment when he turns on the wall and says, "Oh, wicked wall, through whom I see no bliss, cursed be thy stones for thus deceiving me." And he starts pounding on the wall, and uh, Theseus ad libs, as from his seat in the front row. He says, "The wall, methinks, being sensible, should curse again." And Bottom steps right out of character, says, "No, no, sir, he should not. Deceiving me is Thisbe's cue." See, Bottom is now an expert in things theatrical, and he's going to have to explain to the Duke that there's a difference between the actor, me, and the part I play. And the same is true of all my friends. And then this gets carried through with Moonshine and Lion, both, who sort of reveal who they are. The Lion comes out and says, "You ladies, you whose gentle hearts do fear the smallest monstrous mouse that creeps on floor, may now perhaps both quake and tremble here when Lion, wild, in wildest rage doth roar. Roar!" And obviously, actors go to town on this material. It there are many opportunities for broad humor all through Pyramus and Thisbe, which eventually ends with a what sounds like a parody of Romeo and Juliet. That is to say, Thisbe is scared away by the lion. The lion has a bloody mouth from having killed something or other. It worries her scarf, which she has left behind. Pyramus comes, finds that, decides that she has died, that she has been eaten by the lion, draws his sword, kills himself. Then she comes, discovers his suicide, kills herself. Tragedy. Tragedy. End of story. And I won't go into this at great length, but the lovers, by and large, and Theseus turn out to be a pretty tough audience because they start carping and making little side comments from from the sidelines that are basically denigrating, mm, uh, I won't even go into them in great detail. We need to get to our discussion. Um, but ultimately, there's a moment in which Hippolyta, as Pyramus is sticking the sword into him, she says, "Beshrew my heart, but I pity the man." And there are these little moments among the denigration, among the jokes at the actor's expense that indicate that some people, at least, are cutting them some slack. Even Theseus himself has said that at the beginning. He said, uh, sometimes you have to give people props for good intentions. He says, where I have come, great clerks of, people have been so intimidated by my presence they fall all over themselves. But you have to listen to what's underneath it, which is love and respect. And this was stupid and had a lot of unintentional humor in it, but it was done as an act of goodwill and respect from the lower classes to us, their overlords. And you got to give them some credit for that. So, lovers to bed, 'tis almost fairy time, he says, not really knowing of what he speaks, and everyone retires to their marital beds, which opens the door for one last fairy scene, and it's introduced by Puck, who says, "I am come with broom before to sweep the dust behind the door." Marjorie Garber has a nice point about this, is when the door is open, there's a threshold. And a threshold is, as critics now say, a liminal space. That's what limen means in Latin, is a threshold. There's a threshold here between our world and the other world, and the other world now invades the palace with good intentions, with intentions to bless it, to bring a little of the fairy world spirituality into this very physical and political space, and incidentally to bless it against birth defects in particular. Never mole, hair lip, nor scar, or mark prodigious, such as are despised in nativity, shall upon their children be. So the three worlds of the court, the four worlds, if you like, of the court, the lovers, the fairies, and the mechanicals have all come together in this last scene to leave an impression of harmony, of getting along with people, of hoping for the best, and wishing happiness upon the procreative act that is going to continue our presence on the planet and make a harmonious family of human beings. And it ends with Puck If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here, while these visions did appear, and this weak and idle theme no more yielding but a dream. Gentles, do not reprehend. If you pardon, we will mend. And as I am an honest Puck, if we have unearned luck now to scape the serpent's tongue, we shall make amends ere long, else the Puck a liar call. So good night unto you all. Give me your hands, if we be friends, and Robin shall restore amends. And this is a homily of the Elizabethan theater. Give us your hands. We'll see it in The Tempest. We'll see it in As You Like It. There is a final message from the company to the audience. We did our best. If you liked us, please give us your valediction. Thank you. That'll do us. We have something like 10 minutes left for, I see Charlotte Moon has sent up, oh, she sent up an applause. Thank you, Charlotte.
Any questions?
So we have time.
Yeah, don't have any questions in the chat.
Well,
I have a question. In your recommendations,
I'm sorry, I lost my visuals here for a second.
It's
Maybe.
Peter speaking.
Yes,
Peter
okay.
Boffey.
Uh-huh. All right. I don't need to see you.
in your references and recommendations on some of the film versions, was there a particular reason you omitted any mention of the Tamor production on stage and film? I mean, I know there's a lot there, but
A mention of what on stage and
film? Julie Taymor.
Oh, the Tamor. I have not been able to find a filmed version of it. Do you know of one?
Yeah, I saw it on. I'll find it.
That's good to know. I don't have a real high opinion of Julie Taymor as an interpreter of Shakespeare, but she is a wonderful visual director and creates very arresting images. And I would love to see that version. If you tell me how to locate it.
Text you if I don't.
That's good. Yeah. Please let me know because I'd like to screen it sometime.
The reason I'm thinking is I read Bloom's chapter on the play.
Harold Bloom, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he comes on strongly against a lot of the carnal, sexual emphasis put in a lot of what was contemporary at that time. And I'll tell you why I was kind of surprised it wasn't mentioned, because there's a lot of that in the Tamor production.
Yeah.
But it's also very respectful and ample with the text, the language.
Well, yeah. Well, it's certainly true that if you wanted to find two sort of opposing ends of the spectrum in Shakespeare interpretation, Harold Bloom and Julie Taymor would pretty much much represent them. It would be hard to imagine them agreeing on nearly anything.
Well, now that wasn't happening while he was alive. So, but in general, I know that would be the camp in which, he would put her.
Mm-hmm.
I see here in my note, good luck. Let's see, what have I got? You guys talk. I'll pull it out.
Okay, someone else?
I found on PBS, which is like an app. If you're a KQED member, you can follow the trail. And I found it. I also wrote in my note to myself with a question mark, it might also be available on Canopy free. So
Trina put a URL in the chat.
Great.
For a PBS video of Midsummer Night's Dream. We don't know for sure it's the same one you're talking about, but
it does indicate that it's from it's on PBS All Arts Performance Selects 2022 from award-winning director Julie Taymor.
Great.
Sounds like it.
I promise you I will want to see it.
Yeah.
Good.
Thanks, Trina.
Thanks for telling me about it, Peter.
Sure. Well, let us know if you have a take on it.
And
anyone else have any?
Canopy is available through some libraries also for free.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had I was wondering, how does Midsummer sit in the realm of Shakespeare, and do people think of it as, or do scholars think of it as a lesser play? Is it?
I don't think so. Chronologically, it falls on the early side. I'm following rough chronology here, so it's about 7 or 8 years into Shakespeare's 21 or 2 year career as a professional playwright. Okay. Um, uh, Critics take it seriously. Critics like it, I think, because its themes reach so far beyond the world of Elizabethan theater in general. I think it's attempting things that almost no other Elizabethan play had done before, because of its introduction of the fantastical. I'm not surprised that Julie Taymor did it because she also made a film of The Tempest, which we'll be doing later. And I have found in my experience with theater that Midsummer, Macbeth, and The Tempest are the three Shakespeare plays that entice directors the most, and very often entice them into completely straying away from what I think Shakespeare's original intentions were, because they all have to do with the supernatural in some way or other. And that sort of awakes a, a spirit of creativity, and I'm going to put that in air quotes, with directors that sort of tempts them to try to impose some ideas of their own about art, if you will, or about dreams or about nature, uh, which often, I think, lead them away from what makes them work as stage plays. Um, and I've got a long list of productions of The Tempest and Midsummer and Macbeth that I've seen that I've just hated because I think that they've missed the point. They have sort of they have not dealt with what makes them great plays, but rather with what the directors thought they could do with them,
Mm.
which I think always runs the risk of being self-aggrandizing and away from the point.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Um, do you think the play owes anything to Spenser's The Fairy Queen?
Oh, I'm sure it does. Uh, um, uh, I
Shakespeare would
already
have
talked.
known that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I'm
Okay.
sure. I'm sure he knew Spencer. I'm sure they had at least met. Um, Spencer, of course, was close around the court of Elizabeth, and as I say, this play was probably first performed in Elizabeth's presence. There's a very good chance of that. Um, yeah. Now, I don't know the Fairy Queen very well. It's an allegory, but there is a character in it who is thought to be inspired by sort of the cult of Elizabeth as the Virgin Queen. Um I think there are places of overlap in them, but I'm not knowledgeable enough about Spencer to sort of be able to draw you what they are. Nice work, Jenny. You've exposed my ignorance.
I'll follow that up a little bit.
All
Can
right.
you hear me? We're just about out of time, so this question could also apply to the next thing we're doing, much to do about nothing. But you
Yes.
see, a lot of these are begin like court plays before they get translated to the public stage. And I'm just wondering how much topical references there are in these, particularly in the comedies of spoofing court characters or people known in the court. And if you could talk to about a little bit about that.
Well, it would have been very dangerous ground to satirize court characters. Let me give you an illustration of that. The Earl of Essex, sorry, last class I misidentified him as Exeter. It was the Earl of Essex, who some people think may have been Elizabeth's lover, uh, returned from an expedition to Ireland 2 early in about 1599 and eventually was convicted of trying to raise a rebellion against the Queen and was beheaded. Um, as it happens, associates of the Earl of Essex commissioned Shakespeare's company to revive a play that they had done 8 or 9 years before, Richard II. And Richard II contains a scene of the deposition of a monarch. And Shakespeare's company, we have every evidence, got in very serious trouble for staging this. It was thought to be too close to the bone politically. Um, it encouraged people to think in terms of monarchs can be deposed. And that's what they thought Essex and his followers were trying to do. So, by and large, Shakespeare stays away from contemporary satire and contemporary references pretty consistently. It's a dangerous place for any Elizabethan playwright to go. Thomas Kyd, who wrote the Spanish Tragedy and uh, um, who was an associate of uh, Christopher Marlowe's, um, got in a lot of trouble for that association and for um, oh writing blasphemous libels and so forth, and was tortured on the rack. This is a friend of Shakespeare's and Marlowe's, and his health was broken for the rest of his life for going into dangerous political places. So, um, uh, generally speaking, I think Elizabethan playwrights trod very carefully around anything that could be thought to be a topical reference that was critical.
I sensed there was a little bit of echo of what the actors do in front of the court in the way that the mechanicals are wanting to not offend anybody and seem to go overdo the fact we don't mean to offend you here, my
Yeah.
lord, so that kind of you don't go stand in front of the royals and do anything that's going to cause you to get killed.
Yeah, it's put there in the frame of, oh, it's going to be the violence, of wild animals on stage and suicides, that might be taboo subjects. But you're probably right. It probably does impinge on that sense of
It
when
seems,
when you're performing for the gentry, you better watch yourself. You
well,
better,
yeah, it seems one thing to aim at Elizabeth, and another one to aim at other courtiers in the court, and that might be there are a lot of court politics, and there
Yeah,
could be mocking or spoofing of those as
yeah.
staying away from Elizabeth, right? But
yeah, no, yeah. Generally speaking, I think Shakespeare steered clear of all of that sort of thing, possibly from the lesson of what had happened with Richard II. But
Yeah.
I think he was smart enough to look around at the secret police. If you know the film of Elizabeth with Kate Blanchett, um, the character played by Geoffrey Rush, I think, was Walsingham, who was essentially the man who ran Elizabeth's secret police
yeah,
and tortured and imprisoned people for any kind of deviation from what was thought to be acceptable political speech and behavior.
Mm. Well, we need to tie it up. Next month is the Much Ado, more tales of troubled love.
I will say a thing or two about Much Ado. A very interesting play in which, over the years, the subplot has come to outshine the main plot. And you could be thinking of that as you read it or watch versions of it. I'm going to, as always, I will, a week or so in advance, I will send out some. There are not many film versions of it, but there's a couple that are very worth watching. And just keep that in mind, that it's a play that is a little out of balance as regards its structure. that the things that most people remember about the play are not necessarily the things the play is really about.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone.
This is David. Can I get in a question before we?
Yeah, go ahead. You're breaking up a little, but go ahead, try it.
I know this question. Why are mechanicals called mechanical?
Why are the mechanicals called mechanicals? I think you
it's
sort
that,
of explained.
Is that what you said, David?
Yes.
Yeah, it's because of that phrase of Puck's when he's reporting to Oberon. He says, "A crew of patches, rude mechanicals that work for bread upon Athenian stalls." That is to say, they are craftsmen.
Mechanics.
Yeah.
You get the word mechanic here,
and
right?
it doesn't mean they're robotic or have gears inside or anything like that. Simply that they ply at trades. They work with their hands.
Craftsmen, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All righty, everyone. Hope that your favorite film wins the Oscars tonight. And we'll see you in April with Much Ado, and Julian will send out a missive and film review beforehand. And thanks for being here and continuing our journey.
Good seeing you all. We'll if anyone asks you, I'll be sending out the link to the YouTube version no later than tomorrow morning.
Great. And also we can send the link to the PBS production that was referred to.
Yes, thank you.
That Trino referred to. Yeah. And yeah, Peter.
Bye-bye, y'all.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.